Okay, so thank you very much for coming to join me today. I am going to be talking to you today about Apple Managed OS updates, the state of software updates, and Jamf in 2025. And I assume, given that you're all here with me today, you also want to know about Apple Management OS, the state of software update, and Jamf in 2025. I have a bit of an agenda to cover off with you. There's three things that we're going to be talking about. We're going to start off with why software update. For those of you who has been to Jamf Nation Live before, who has been to a software update talk before? In a minute, I will talk about why we are doing this again. We'll cover that off. Software update is a really complex topic, and I have 45 minutes. I think I'm probably going to come in at like 49 minutes, something like that. So we're going to go through it pretty quickly. But the actual topic of software update is a really broad topic. There's a ton of things to cover, and so we're going to really focus in on a very small portion of that. I will try to make this as accessible as possible, and so if you are new to this, you're in the right place. If you've been around for a long time, this might be a bit more simple for you, but hopefully there will be something in here for everybody. So we're going to cover three things. Why are we talking about this? Understanding modern Apple software updates. So kind of some terminology stuff, things that you need to understand to be able to effectively deploy software updates to your organization. And then finally, we're going to be talking about Jamf Pro capabilities. So what are we able to tangibly achieve to ensure that our organization goes from A to B using Jamf Pro and the tools in the GUI and things like that? Does that sound reasonable? Cool. OK, so why software update? So we do this talk, like we said, we do this talk every year. Why do it again? So as you'll have heard, there's kind of a narrative that has run through everything that's been talked about today. Software updates are more important than they've ever been. There are new people in the audience here. So one of the reasons we're covering this is that there are new people to this every single day. It's one of the most complex aspects of device deployment. It's often misunderstood. There's lots of assumed knowledge, both from an Apple perspective and from a Jamf perspective, and we'll see some of this when we go into the GUI in a moment. There's a lot of things that you need to be able to know from a background perspective to be able to deploy software update. And also the why has evolved. So this brings it back to the why of software update. So we have security, new people, and then the why of software update. So the why of software update has evolved somewhat since. So I didn't say this up front, but I used to work at Apple a long time ago, and really interestingly, the narrative as we talk to customers for a software update perspective has changed quite a lot. So when I used to talk to customers back when Apple was just pushing into the enterprise, we would talk to customers in the context of ensuring that the experience that people got in the enterprise when they were using Apple devices was as close to the consumer feeling experience as possible, because we wanted everybody to have a really great experience. And that's absolutely still true today. However, I think that the narrative has changed a little bit to kind of put the security element at the forefront of that. So as Apple has expanded and grown in the enterprise, we know that every Fortune 500 company in the world is deploying Apple devices, and as a result, they are more targeted than they have ever been from an attacker's perspective. So let's keep going with that idea of security, and I'm going to give you a bit of contextual information around that and kind of bring it into a bit of a real-life example. OK. I'm not going to go around with a microphone, but does anybody know what CVE means? Just shout out. Somebody said yes. Great. Thank you. That was very helpful. Common vulnerabilities and exposures. Thank you, my friend in the front row. So you can think of CVE. There's a really important, useful contextual information when we start to drill into the kind of security narrative behind software updates. So CVE, common vulnerabilities and exposures. You can kind of think of a CVE like a serial number for known, or for kind of categorization of flaws in pieces of software. So for those of you that aren't familiar with this stuff, you can go out there, you can take a CVE number, and you can look that up, and it will tell you about the flaw and when it was patched and where it's vulnerable in specific versions of software. Hopefully, I'm not going to get yes for this one. Does anybody know what KEV stands for? Short for Kevin? Yeah, 100%. Anyone else? In the context of security? Who said that? Thank you, my friend. I'll send you the money later. Exactly that. So known exploited vulnerabilities. So interestingly, for everyone's benefit, these are still reported as CVE. So when you look them up, they will still be called CVE with a number. But importantly, we need to understand the severity behind these because it means that we know that these CVEs have been actively exploited by attackers in the wild. So we know that if a KEV is in any of the software that we're deploying in our enterprise organization or in education, we need to make sure that we fix that as soon as possible to stop that problem. So I wanted to give you a kind of a visual component to this to kind of make it a bit more tangible and real. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a timeline of risk and remediation. So if we jump back to the beginning of 2025, which is a bit of a blur to me because I have a baby and I don't remember any of that, and we jump forward a little bit to the 31st of March. Now, there was something very significant about the 31st of March, which is macOS 15.4 came out. And this is really small in the corner. I'll be happy to share this in links out afterwards. But Apple document this, so you can go to Apple's website, and they will list out the CVEs that they fix in that particular version of the operating system. So if we're just focused on macOS, we're not looking at iOS, iPadOS, tvOS, visionOS, watchOS, we're just looking at macOS 15.4, there was 153 CVEs in that version that Apple documented, found, and fixed. If we jump forward 16 days, macOS 15.4.1 came out, and there was 2 known exploited vulnerabilities in that version of the operating system. And those are the ones that are really serious that you want to make sure that you fix. If we jump forward to the 12th of May, 26 days later, we can see that 15.5 came out, which included 50 CVEs. So you can see that in the space of about a month, we've had to push out 3 software updates to our organization. And as you can imagine, these are all really important things that you want to make sure that you're on top of, so we need to understand really clearly how to be able to effectively deliver software updates. There's a couple of takeaways from this. So the first is that Apple is taking this really seriously, which is fantastic to see. It's nice to see that they're documented. It's nice that we can have access to them. It's nice that Apple is taking the time to really take security seriously and push the updates out for us, which is fantastic. It's also really important to know that it's never been more important to have a good strategy around software update. So now that we've covered the why of software update, let's discuss some of the technology that we need to be familiar with to be able to actually deploy the software updates to our organization. So why don't we start by covering off some, not all, because we don't have a long time, but some of the bits and pieces from the Apple side of things. So I know many of you know this, but again, level setting everybody. So and to be honest, I say that jokingly on the slide, but some of this language is really tangibly important because when it comes to deploying software update in the GUI in Jamf Pro, we use the same terminology, so it is really important. Let's have a look at each one of these. So on the left here, we have minor software updates, and what that refers to, this is Apple's language from their platform deployment guide, and what that refers to is anything with a point after it. So for example, we had on the previous slide 15.4, 15.4.1, and 15.5. Those would all be considered minor software updates. If we look at major software updates, these are the kind of the big tentpole releases. So a fantastic example of this would be the 26 releases that will come at some point in the fall. Those are referred to as software upgrades. And then finally, something just for completeness, to make sure that I don't get people asking me about it, we have the last thing, which is rapid security response updates. I'm not really going to spend too much time on that. I could talk about that for an hour and a half, but we're going to focus on the first two. And very subtly, you will see that I'm going to underline updates and upgrades because they are different. So Apple refers to those differently, and so do we in our UI. So we refer to minor updates and major upgrades. And I'm just going to use them interchangeably going forward, so don't hold me to that. OK, so show of hands. I'm not going to pick on anyone. I promise I never will pick on anyone in the audience, so you can wave loud and proud. How many of you are using declarative device management? Who's not, just out of interest? A fair chunk of you, cool. So it's really important to understand that what I'm going to be talking about today is the declarative device management underpinned version of software updates. So this is kind of bleeding edge, forward-looking, modern things. So we're not going to be covering any of the old stuff. How many of you, again, last time weren't using it? Well, you're all wrong because you're all using it. One of the things that we've had in Jamf Pro for a really, really long time, is evident from the stuff that Mike was talking about this morning on the main stage, is that we've spent a really long time kind of integrating declarative management in lots of different ways in Jamf Pro for a very long time, and in Jamf Now and in Jamf School. And all the way back in 1033, I think, we implemented the ability to enable declarative management for devices very quietly. So you've all been using it for a very long time. Now, this is important, it is relevant. There is going to be a talk on blueprints later on, so I'm not going to tread on anybody's toes, but I am going to talk to you about why declarative management is important. And I've heard it's pretty comprehensive, and I think that people struggle to grasp, in some ways, what declarative management is. I've got a really simple diagram here that's going to help to show how we communicate from using Jamf Pro, Jamf Now, and Jamf School, and how that used to work before declarative management, so before blueprints and things like that, to help illustrate why declarative software updates are a much more significant way of doing it, and declarative management in general. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll send some kind of command to the device. For example, maybe I want to install an app. And to be clear, I should have put the pedantic note on this slide too. This is just a kind of high-level example of how this works. The device tells us that it's received the command. We say, OK, so you've acknowledged the request. Can you do it for me? And the device comes back and says, OK, I'll install the app now. And then we queue up the command and send the next command to the device. What all of this ignores is that there is a ton of logic that underpins all of this stuff, and there's all sorts of pauses that are going on while the device goes and fetches information, and there's all sorts of things around handling failure gracefully and all that sort of stuff. So if you think about this from the context of old-fashioned software update, this was particularly tough because you would go, I would like you to do a software update, and then we would say, the device would come back and say, cool, I'll check to see if I've got any. OK, Jamf Pro, here's the ones that I can do. And we say, OK, do this one. And it goes, OK. And we go, have you done it yet? And the device goes, no. And we go, have you done it yet now? And the device is like, no. Hey, what about now? No. OK, I've done it. Cool. And if you multiply that by any kind of scale, that's a real challenge. And you're going to see a bit of a theme as we go through this. If any of that, of course, fails for any reason, too, we have to keep queuing up those commands and handling all the edge cases and all those weird things as well. So one of the things that's really great if we contrast that with declarative management is that declarative device management proactively communicates the state change with us as an MDM vendor. So the device, the difference is that the device itself will, as things change on the device will tell us when those things change. So I want to stress that we're just talking about one component of declarative management here, of which there are, I would say, broadly three. So at the moment, we're talking about status channels, so the ability for us as Jamf to be able to subscribe to local information about all these devices, and then anytime any of those things change, they proactively push that back to us. And this is important because this will come up later in a demo that I'm going to do. This is why, if I build up a slide and give you the example, this is how it tangibly works. So for example, we might subscribe to device.operating-system.version, and then as that changes, the device proactively communicates that change to us, which is much more effective and much more scalable. So we've looked at the terminology, we've looked at declarative device management status channels. There are two kind of key areas left that we need to have a look at. So one of those is blueprints in Jamf Pro and Jamf School, and the other one of those is the end user experience of declarative device management that's actually underpinning software update as a whole. So let's have a look at Jamf blueprints, and I appreciate there is a Jamf blueprint session. This is a very, very high-level cursory look at this. The important thing to understand when it comes to blueprints is that we talked about the status channel stuff. This is the kind of one of the other cool features of declarative management, which is the declarations themselves. So the other portion of this is the device locally manages its own state. So in the case of software updates, one of the things that's really great is that we can say, hey, this device here, I want this device to be on the latest version of the operating system. I want it to happen next week. And from there forwards, the device will manage itself. We've told it the outcome state, and all of that stuff will be managed here. And through a combination of the declaration on the device and us managing the status channels, that's how we effectively take your device from 15.4.1 to 15.5. So we're 16 slides in. I have been talking for 16 minutes, coincidentally, and I still haven't shown you anything to do with software update, but we will get to that right now. So what we're going to do is look at, we've looked at declarative device management, we've looked at the terminology that surrounds software updates. If we put those together and have a look at what declarative device management-based software update actually looks like. So this is Noel's iPad, this is an old video, but it still is relevant and useful, and we will also have a look at this on my device in a minute for real, because I'm going to do a live demo. We see iPadOS here, and what you'll see if I play the video is that from a user-facing perspective, it's a really elegant process. As I said a minute ago, as an admin, we tell the device, whether it's iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and so on, that we want to move the device from A to B. The device manages that experience locally, and you can see that your organization has decided to update your device, and it gives the user that information. One of the things that's really useful, if you go and have a look in the Apple Platform Deployment Guide, is they have a really nice graphic that shows what the user experience feels like as time progresses towards that ultimate deadline. So you'll see in a minute on the device that I'm going to demo with, but the user receives an update, receives a notification to say, hey, a managed update has been scheduled for your device. And then as that time progresses and gets closer and closer to happening, the notifications become more and more frequent until the user is ultimately forced through that process. There are some interesting things to note as well. You get the kind of the great Apple experience where everything is handled very gracefully. So for example, if I go on holiday and I miss the deadline because my device hasn't been connected to the internet, the next time I start using my device, as a user, I'm given a little bit of a grace period just to make sure that nothing is destroyed on the device that I'm working on, like nothing is interrupted, and then that update will happen 1 hour later. The last thing to talk about are the prerequisites to be able to deploy it, of which there are many. And this is what I said earlier on around a lot of assumed esoteric knowledge. You need to know a lot of things to be able to effectively deploy software updates. So the asterisk on the slide, it is absolutely possible to be able to deploy software updates without a bootstrap token on the Mac, but it will prompt the end user for a password. So if you want to do this truly silently, you need to make sure that you have a device that is iOS and iPadOS 17 and above, macOS 14 and above. You need to ensure that the devices are enrolled in your MDM, be that Pro, Now, or School. And you also need to make sure that they're supervised and that the bootstrap token is escrowed. If any of you are wondering how that happens from a bootstrap token escrow perspective, I could go into that in a bit more detail, but we're a bit pressed for time. But just know that Jamf does the job of kind of scooping that off the device and storing that for you so that everything's done for you. I saw somebody go, it's probably reasonable, so we'll talk afterwards. The nature of this talk is actually very timely. I didn't plan it this way. I always plan to talk about just declarative management going forwards, but this is a statement that Apple made during WWDC. So software update management using mobile device management, commands, restrictions, the com.apple.softwareupdate payload and queries is deprecated, and Apple will remove it in the next year. So if you are not using this now, if you're not using declarative management to manage your Macs, you will need to start learning how to do this, because it will be the way that you're having to do this going forwards. OK, so to summarize, despite us skipping over a load of stuff related to software updates that I didn't have time to talk about, all you have to know to be able to effectively deploy software updates is this: the security reasons that we are doing it, the terminologies around CVEs and KEVs, and keeping up to date with that. You need to know major versus minor. You need to know upgrade versus update. You need to understand how declarative device management with software update works, how we're able to proactively monitor the progression of that with status channels, being able to deploy the update itself with declarations, and manage how the devices behave in the context of software updates with blueprints. We also know what the end user experience looks like. We know that our devices need to be supervised. We know that they need to be 17+, 14+. We know that the devices need to be managed. We know that we need to have bootstrap tokens escrowed. I think that might be it. Software update is really hard. So let's have a look at some of this stuff for real on real devices. OK. So this is Jamf Pro. Is anybody familiar with Jamf Pro? I heard yes. There we go. So this is Jamf Pro. This is my instance of Jamf Pro. So one of the things I'm going to do is show you how, take you through the process of upgrading a device using Jamf Pro and the GUI, and just point some useful things out. So the first thing that we talked about is making sure that we scope it to the right devices. So what I'm going to do is hop in here to computers, hop into smart groups, and you can see I made one of these earlier. I'm going to dig into this smart group and hit edit, take you through this really quickly. You can see that in this particular smart group, all I'm doing is checking to ensure that I'm targeting devices in my organization that have bootstrap token escrowed, that are supervised, that the operating system is the right version for the ones that I'm targeting, so not running the latest, but still capable of being able to do that. And in this case, I'm also filtering by a specific serial number because I'm doing a demo and I'd like it to work nicely. So if we hit View, you can see that I've got a Mac, and it's there. So that falls into all the right criteria to ensure that I'm able to update that particular device. So let's go through the process of actually doing that. So what I'm going to do is grab, just in case, grab the serial number. I'm going to go to the tab for software update. I'm going to choose JNL 25 software update. I will tap Update. Now. I would like all of you to play along with this. So if you'll pull out your phones and hop into my Slido. Tell me when you're ready. I'll see the numbers hopefully tick up in the corner. Maybe I'll just give it a refresh because I haven't touched this for a while. I can see one of you's done it, so thank you. I'll let it get to 50, and then I'll stop. Go on, a few more of you, come on. OK, so while you're doing that, I'm just going to hop back to the other screen very quickly. So what I'd like you to do, just to play along, so one of the things I talked about is assumed knowledge, having to make sure that you're very comfortable with the idea of deploying a software update and all of the things that surround it. And this is one of the places that people, one of the hurdles that people have and fall down around. So what I'd like you to do in this app is, what I'd like you to do in the app that you all joined, I will go back to it in a second if you still want to join, is tell me which one of these 5 options is the one that is underpinned by declarative device management. 4 of those are the old ones. 1 of them is the new one. So what I'd like you to do is to use the app or use the website, vote. Cool. So interesting. So one of the things that's really interesting, so if I go back here and show you what the actual answer is, so the actual answer is download and schedule to install. And many of you were incorrect. And this is why it's really important. I know that many people really struggle with software update, and so the first thing I'm going to do is help you with that. So that's the right one. If any of you have any feedback around this, please let me know. I'll be happy to pass it on. But this is one of the things. Like, there are so many things that you have to know to be able to effectively come to the table and move your devices from A to B. And if you remember the timeline that I showed you earlier, having to do this 3 times in 3 weeks means that this is something that you really need to spend time on and make sure that you get right. So what I'm going to do is choose the DDM underpinned software update version. I'm going to schedule the update, and this is one of the things that Apple allows us to do that's really, really nice. So I'm going to say, hey, on Friday, I'd like this device to be able to update at 1 p.m. And what will happen is the device will determine that locally, so it will be based on its own local time zone. So if you're doing this as a multinational, you need to bear that in mind. And remember, earlier on I said you need to understand between major, minor, and or major, minor, update, upgrade. This is really important too, because one of the things that Apple allows us to do, which is amazing, is that many of you are probably testing for compatibility around the 26 updates that are coming out later in the year. Let's say that you have an internal app in your organization and you want to ensure that your users are on the latest version of the operating system, but you're not quite ready to be able to upgrade to 26. Maybe you have an internal app that isn't quite there yet. What you could do is say, I specifically want to push the latest minor version of the operating system, stay on iOS 18, for example, for an extra week or 2 until we've managed to fix that compatibility, and then push to the next major version. So you have the ability to kind of stay on the latest version and still get the latest software updates, the latest security updates, without having to necessarily jump to the next major version. Obviously, us here at Jamf, people at Apple will tell you latest and greatest is always the best way. And in fact, in the deployment guide, it explicitly says if you want the best security experience, be on the latest version. But know that you do have the ability to do that. So I'm going to do this. Can I get a clap? It worked. How compelling is this that you're all sitting here while I'm updating a Mac? So if we come in here and we find my Mac, you can come into operating system and you can see, excellent, it's started. One of the other things that's useful to know here is that it's quite challenging to be able to see the status of a device as it goes through the process at scale. So in this instance, I can see, great, it's happening on a one-to-one basis, but if I want to check, if I push this to 100 devices, I'd have to go and check all those 100 devices, and there are some wonderful scripts out there and wonderful apps out there that allow you to kind of like run a command against your active devices that are in progress and pull that information out. But you can see at the moment that the device is accepting the plan. The last thing I want to say about this before we go over to the actual device itself is, you saw on the stage this morning that the folks showed blueprints, and they specifically called out software update. Really important to understand that to deliver software updates, you need to do that in either the computer tab or the devices tab with software update. This specifically, from a blueprints perspective, is how you manage the kind of behaviors around software updates. So Do I want my users to be able to upgrade themselves? Do I want my users to be able to deploy betas and things like that? I was given permission to share this with everybody, but just know that the idea in future is that this will be the one-stop shop. This will be the place that you go. So in future, even the ability to schedule the commands and send them to everybody will be sensibly moved into here, so that you will have one place in Jamf Pro to be able to effectively manage software update, and it will be really, really simple. No claps. OK, the last thing I want to show you before I hop over to the Mac, this is a really cool tip. It's really useful, and not many people know about it. So if you go into your Pro instance and you go to /API, I'm going to go on View, and I'm going to log in using my credentials. I'm going to authorize that, and I scroll down to declarative management. The reason I point this out is if any of you are building apps or scripts or anything like that, this is a really cool thing that not many people know about. So if I come back here and look at this, this is the current state. The current state of the device is accepting plan. Apple has their own terminology, and we use our own terminology that's a little bit different. The idea, I think, from our perspective, from a design state of things, is to be able to give you a bit more clarity or a bit more detail around what's actually happening with the device using some of the other state information of the device. If you just want to know what is going on in a very, very simple way, if we look at Apple's developer documentation for status channels, if I come in here and grab the software.install state software, the software update.install-state status channel, you can see that one of the cool things is that you can query the device and find out what state it's currently in, whether it's downloading, prepared, or installing. So if I come back here and I hit try out, I stick the key in, and I go back to my device, which isn't going to work because it's in a different instance. Give me 1 second. Sorry, everyone, 1 second. You'll need the Jamf Pro management ID of the device that you want to query. Put that in there, hit execute. And you can see that currently, there is nothing going on my device, even though I've scheduled the update. And I suspect that that's probably because this is not actually connected to the internet, because I didn't want it to update before I even got to the point where I was talking to you. So that'll be why. Hopefully that was helpful. Did anybody know about that? Is anybody using that? One man. Maybe two? Two, three? Three. OK, cool. That's helpful. Good. OK, so let's move over to this other device. So you can see that I schedule the command to this device. You can see that I get the notification. And like I said, it's really nice. It's respectful of do not disturb. So if I have do not disturb enabled, that does change as the update creeps up. So if you're within the 24-hour window, it will still notify you that it's going to happen, because obviously Apple doesn't want to destroy anything you're working on. A couple of things to show you. Earlier, I was talking about declarations. So you can actually see that on the device. And I said that the device locally manages the state. So if I come in here and I look in the MDM profile, and I scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can see here that this device is required to install 15.5. And if I go to General again, and I go to Software Update, you can see that already the update is preparing on the device. So everything is working as intended, which is really cool. However, we all know, this has always been true, the easiest way of being able to convince an end user to update their device is to convince them to do it yourself. And so I'm going to give you a really great example of that. So what I'm going to do is open Self-Service Plus. I'm going to go to Bookmarks, and I'm going to go to 365. So this user is going about their job, and they're accessing 365, and they're going to hop into, so they were able to access 365. We're using single sign-on extensions here, so it didn't ask for my password. I'm Adele today. You can see here I'm able to access SharePoint. I'm able to access my super secret internal documentation. That's absolutely great. However, if I try to access Outlook, in this case, I'm not able to. So this is there is a dedicated Zero Trust Network access session today delivered by a couple of my colleagues. But this is a really simple way of being able to show that with Jamf, it's not just about being able to deploy software updates. You can kind of encourage users to be able to do this. So you saw that I'm on a enrolled device that's managed, that's supervised. I've got an authenticated user. I'm using single sign-on extensions. For all intents and purposes, this is a trusted individual or a trusted device. However, one of the great things about Zero Trust Network Access is that we are constantly evaluating the state of the device, and then on a per-service basis, we can determine the security protocols that sit around that experience. And so, in this particular example, we determined in our organization that, you know what, if you're not on the latest version of the operating system, that's fine for 365. That's fine for our confidential documentation in SharePoint. But for Outlook, absolutely not. And so really nice thing just to be able to show at the end, to say that there are other ways of being able to do this within Jamf that I don't know that everybody is aware of. So if you're not doing this today, this is a really nice way of being able to do that. And of course, the same thing that we talk about all the time at Jamf with automation is completely true here. So if you wanted, off the back of this, to be able to have this fall into a smart group and then start deploying stuff to the device, like scripts or apps or policy, all of that stuff can be done and automated so that you folks in the audience can get back to doing the things that are important. My demo worked. OK, so we're going to change track a little bit here. So we spent time talking about the prerequisites that you need to know, the terminology that you need to understand, the reasons it's really important, what Jamf Pro is and School and now are capable of tangibly delivering to your devices, and the tools that you have at your fingertips to be able to effectively update and upgrade devices in your organization. This was not on the agenda. This is just something a little bit extra. This is a good opportunity to talk about something that's a little bit special to me. So has anybody in here heard of Jamf Concepts before? Can I see a good few of you? So if you haven't, the website is concepts.jamf.com. If anybody has used Setup Manager, has anyone used Setup Manager? So Setup Manager is a fine example of a former Concepts product. So it was built by one of the folks that works alongside me in my team, Armin. He's probably in here somewhere. Armin built built Setup Manager, and it lived on Jamf Concepts, and it's still available through Jamf Concepts. So the idea of Jamf Concepts is a website that we have internally or externally that allows Jamf people to be able to build apps and scripts and things like that help to support customers. Importantly, they don't come with any customer service or anything like that, but they're useful tools that people in the community will hopefully find useful. And so what I'm going to get to do today is to introduce something that I have been working on, which is a new app that I'm calling Upgrade Manager. So again, this is not a Jamf product, although we are pushing it into Jamf Concepts. It doesn't come with any warranty or anything like that. It doesn't come with any support. I made it. This is something that I built in my spare time outside of work. But the idea is that this is a native Swift UI app, and the purpose of this is to kind of remove some of the friction around updating and upgrading devices in your organization. So if you put in your credentials to your Jamf Pro instance, it will pull in devices that are not currently up to date, but are technically capable of receiving them. So if you see it in this list, it is able to be updated, and you can see that it identifies what your current version of the OS is and what it's capable of being able to deploy. You can deploy in any kind of scale, so if you want to deploy one-to-one devices, if you want to deploy a group, you can do that. You can select when you want it to happen, the time, the date, all of those sorts of things. Once you've scheduled that, and you obviously can choose between the different types. Once you've done that and you've hit upgrade, you can move across to in progress, where it will give you a real-time overview of all of your devices in your organization as they proceed from the start to the end. So you can tackle anything that you need, and any issues get floated to the top. If those issues are able to be fixed without having to speak to a user, so for example, in this case, if the disk space was full, if the drive was full, you as an admin would need to speak to the user, so you get a push notification, you can go and speak to that individual. If it's something like the user doesn't have a network connection, we'll just automatically requeue that for you and do all of the cool stuff. There's a couple of things to announce here. So it's going to be a private beta, so you can message me and you can opt in if you're interested. Two things to mention. There's a load of cool things that I want to put into this app, but there are a couple of things that I want to mention that will be there for 1.0. So this was built as a universal application. So it's a universal app, so that means that despite me showing it here on iOS, it will also work on iPadOS and macOS. It was built with Swift data in mind, so if you start a process on macOS and you carry on with your phone, it will do all of the cool synchronization for you, so you can follow that wherever you are, which is nice. And the last thing that I really want to get in there for 1.0, which is something that a lot of people ask for, is kind of set and forget auto update. So thank you for indulging me with that last little bit, because that was for me. If anybody is interested, please email me. I've got a couple more weeks of things to do, but the idea will be that we will contact you, we'll get your information, and we will set up test flight to be able to get you access. Again, I will say, I built this. And with that, I am between you folks and lunch, so thank you very much for listening.